Ready to the 2025 WNBA Finals presented by YouTube TV. We'll begin with remarks from Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, and then we'll turn.
What if the most famous, most talked about athlete in the entire country was earning less money from her sport than your neighborhood dentist? It sounds unthinkable, like a tale pulled straight out of a forgotten decade. Music, but it's the staggering reality that the WNBA fought desperately to keep buried. When the truth about Caitlin Clark's contract finally surfaced, it didn't just generate headlines. It ignited a full-scale crisis at the highest levels of the league, uncovering a truth far more shattered than music anyone had dared to imagine. This isn't simply a story about a low paycheck. It's about a system teetering on the edge of collapse, a commissioner in full panic mode, and a cover-up that unraveled in breathtaking fashion. The number that ultimately broke the internet was almost painfully absurd. When Caitlin Clark, now the woman who single-handedly tripled the viewership for women's college basketball, was drafted #1 overall, the world expected a landmark contract to match her landmark impact. Instead, the figures that emerged sent a shockwave of pure disbelief ricocheting across the globe. Her 4-year rookie deal totaled just over $338,000. But the real gut punch was her first-year salary, a staggering low of just $76,000. $535. To put that into perspective, the very last pick in the NBA draft, a player most fans will never once hear about, signs a contract worth well over $1 million annually. The public reaction was immediate and music ferocious. It ballooned into such a massive cultural flashpoint that even the President of the United States stepped forward publicly declaring that women are not receiving their fair share. And suddenly the league found itself drowning in a public relations disaster entirely of its own creation. Every sports program, every major news outlet, and every corner of social media was consumed by the same burning question. How on earth is this still happening? The WNBA, a league that had spent decades clawing for relevance, music, was finally standing in the spotlight, but for all the worst possible reasons. The humiliation ran so deep that it swallowed the excitement of her arrival whole. And as the outrage grew deafening, the league office understood it had to act. But what came next would only pour gasoline on an already raging fire. As the firestorm exploded, WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert scrambled frantically to contain the damage, but her response was perceived by most observers as a catastrophic miscalculation. Rather than confronting the core issue of shockingly inadequate compensation head-on, she launched into a desperate media blitz, music, that felt far less like genuine leadership and far more like a panicked attempt to redirect the national conversation. It was textbook corporate deflection at its most transparent. Engelbert made the rounds on major television networks, not armed with a concrete solution, but with a carefully rehearsed list of talking points engineered to distract from an embarrassing and undeniable truth. She repeatedly pivoted to the league's newly introduced charter flights for players, a long-overdue upgrade that had absolutely nothing to do with player compensation. She highlighted marketing opportunities and ancillary player benefits, essentially working overtime to convince a skeptical public that the $76,000 salary wasn't the complete picture. Music, but her defensive posture and stubborn refusal to acknowledge the fundamental injustice of the situation only poured more fuel onto an already towering inferno. It registered to most viewers as a bizarre public meltdown, a high-powered executive visibly furious that ordinary people had dared to peek behind the curtain. She painted a portrait of a league charging forward with momentum, but it rang completely hollow. Every single time she circled back to charter flights, critics immediately fired back. That's a step forward, sure, but it doesn't change the fact that your most valuable player is being compensated like a part-time intern. Her entire communication strategy imploded spectacularly. By relentlessly minimizing the salary conversation, she made the league appear dangerously disconnected from reality, and, perhaps even worse, music, completely unrepentant about it. The public saw straight through the spin. They recognized a league that had been handed the rarest of gifts in Caitlin Clark and appeared stubbornly unwilling to honor what that gift was actually worth. But what the commissioner was so frantically trying to steer everyone away from was a far more layered and damaging truth about where Caitlin Clark's real financial power was actually being generated. Because the Real story made the WNBA look less like a partner in her success and more like a minor footnote in a sprawling financial empire. The explosive secret the commissioner had no desire to discuss was that Caitlin Clark's WNBA salary is, for all practical purposes, completely meaningless to her financial reality. While the league was cutting her checks that wouldn't impress a mid-level corporate manager, Clark was methodically constructing a business empire that dwarfed the entire WNBA salary structure combined. The real engine driving her wealth was roaring along entirely outside the league's reach or control. Before she ever laced up her sneakers for a single WNBA game, she had already locked in a transformative endorsement partnership with Nike, widely reported to be worth an earth-shaking $28 million across 8 years. That deal alone came packaged with her very own signature shoe, a distinction reserved exclusively for the most iconic athletes walking the planet. And it hardly ended there. Gatorade Music and State Farm and Panini all eagerly formed a line to attach their brands to her name, funneling millions more directly into her accounts. Suddenly, the $76,000 salary didn't merely look small. It looked like a deliberate insult. Clark had become a walking, breathing corporation, a one-woman economic phenomenon, and her official employer was compensating her with what amounted to a rounding error against her actual net worth. This manufactured a deeply uncomfortable reckoning for the WNBA. It laid bare the unmistakable fact that the league desperately needed her in ways she would never need them. She wasn't simply an employee fulfilling a roster spot. She was a global phenomenon who had chosen to grace the league with her extraordinary presence. The entire power dynamic had been flipped completely on its head. Rather than the league elevating her into stardom, she was a superstar actively elevating the league into relevance. And every time a fresh endorsement announcement dropped, music, it functioned as yet another glaring, unavoidable reminder of the enormous chasm separating her true market value from her league-mandated paycheck. This raised a far more unsettling and fundamental question. If everyone from Nike's boardroom to the average fan in the stands understood her worth without hesitation, why was the WNBA itself, music, seemingly paralyzed and unable to pay it? The answer was buried deep inside a legal document that functioned like an iron set of golden handcuffs locked tightly around the entire league. The reason the WNBA couldn't simply write Caitlin Clark a larger check, even if every executive in the building genuinely wanted to, is a story that is as complex as it is maddening. The league is shackled by its own rulebook, specifically a document known as the Collective Bargaining Agreement, music, or CBA. This is a governing master contract negotiated between the league and the players' union that controls everything from travel arrangements to, most critically, player salaries. It enforces a rigid rookie wage scale, which is precisely why Clark's salary was locked in stone long before she ever heard her name called on draft night. The current CBA was signed back in 2020, years before any rational person could have forecasted the meteoric and unstoppable rise of a generational talent like Caitlin Clark. At the time, the agreement was carefully crafted to deliver financial stability for the league and guarantee a fair distribution of revenue across all players, not exclusively the marquee names. It was a framework constructed for a league experiencing slow and steady incremental growth, not one that was about to be blindsided by a full-force cultural tidal wave. Now, that very same document has transformed into a pair of iron golden handcuffs. The league is legally cornered, completely unable to carve out an exception for one player regardless of how seismic her cultural footprint has become. If they were to craft a special arrangement for Clark, it would shatter the agreement with the players' union and detonate chaos throughout the entire organization. Music. So while Commissioner Engelbert was busy deflecting publicly, she was privately suffocating under a problem that had no clean or immediate solution available to her. The league was reaping enormous financial rewards from Clark's very presence. Music. Yet its own legal infrastructure made it impossible to compensate her in any way that reflected her actual value. It is a bureaucratic nightmare, music, that has cornered the WNBA inside a truly impossible dilemma. Honor the rules and be branded as cheap, or shatter the rules and trigger a full-blown mutiny from every other player on every other roster. This festering internal conflict is the dirty little secret lurking at the very center of the Caitlin Clark pay controversy. It was never solely about one player's paycheck. It has always been about a system that was engineered for an entirely different world. A system that is now visibly fracturing under the sheer gravitational weight of a once-in-a-generation superstar. While the league sat paralyzed inside its own bureaucratic cage, the Caitlin Clark effect was rewriting the sport's entire landscape in real time, generating a tidal wave of attention and revenue that made her embarrassingly low salary look more grotesquely absurd with each passing day. The numbers being reported were nothing short of staggering. In her very first handful of games, television viewership for the WNBA exploded upward, with certain broadcasts, music, recording a 200 to 300% surge compared to the exact same window the prior year. Games featuring her Indiana Fever were relocated to significantly larger venues simply to absorb the unprecedented demand flooding in for tickets. Arenas across the entire country were selling out completely for the first time in years, with fans pushing and scrambling desperately just to witness the new face of the sport in person. Her jersey, music, shot to the top of the sales charts for any athlete across any sport on the very day of the draft. She wasn't simply playing professional basketball anymore. She had become a one-woman economic stimulus package injected directly into the bloodstream of a league that was starving for exactly that kind of energy. But this extraordinary success quickly revealed itself as a razor-sharp, double-edged sword. Every sold-out arena, every record-shattering television rating, and every wave of fresh merchandise revenue only magnified the raw injustice of her $76,000 annual salary. It produced a glaring and deeply uncomfortable paradox for everyone paying attention. The individual most directly responsible for manufacturing this financial renaissance was simultaneously the one receiving the smallest slice of its direct rewards. This wedged the league into an even more suffocating and awkward corner. They were loudly trumpeting this sudden and spectacular surge in popularity with one hand, while being relentlessly and publicly flogged with the other for underpaying the singular person who had made every single bit of it possible. The Caitlin Clark effect had proven itself to be too massive, too rapid, and too overwhelming for the WNBA's crumbling and outdated infrastructure to absorb or contain. She was outpacing the league in real time, and the widening financial chasm between her undeniable impact and her insulting income was building into a pressure cooker tension that was about to burst violently beyond the headlines and spill directly onto the hardwood itself. Music, exposing a far darker and more troubling dimension of her celebrated arrival. Beyond the contracts, the press conferences, and the screaming headlines, a quieter yet arguably far more combustible drama had begun taking root inside locker rooms and playing out in real time on WNBA courts everywhere. The suffocating volume of media attention orbiting Caitlin Clark generated an unspoken but palpable tension that permeated every single game she played. While Clark was being publicly crowned as the league's messiah and its greatest hope for survival, countless veteran players, women who had quietly sacrificed years of their lives in near total obscurity to keep the WNBA breathing, suddenly found themselves reduced to mere supporting characters in someone else's headline story. And this dynamic reportedly unleashed a simmering wave of professional jealousy and deep-seated resentment that expressed itself through a brutally physical and unwelcoming introduction to the professional game. Opponents came at her with an aggressive and punishing physicality that routinely crossed well beyond acceptable boundaries, with dangerous cheap shots and punishing hard fouls that felt unmistakably engineered to deliver a crystal-clear message. You may be the darling of every television camera in the building, but you have not earned a single thing inside these lines yet. The controversy was accelerated by a handful of high-profile incidents that detonated across social media, capturing Clark being driven violently to the floor by flagrant fouls that bore far more resemblance to deliberate personal targeting than to any recognizable basketball play. Certain analysts maintained it was simply the standard, time-honored welcome to the professional game that every incoming rookie endures without exception. But a massive and increasingly vocal portion of the fanbase saw something far more calculated and sinister unfolding before their eyes. They saw a league whose established stars were seething with frustration at being systematically overlooked and were channeling that bitterness directly onto the shoulders of the newest and brightest phenomenon the sport had ever produced. And so this manufactured a complicated, poisonous, and deeply divisive narrative that nobody in the league's front office knew how to defuse. Was this simply fierce, hard-nosed, competitive basketball doing what it has always done? Or was it an unmistakable symptom of a far deeper and more dangerous fracture splitting the league apart from the inside? The situation wedged the WNBA into yet another suffocating bind, with no clean exit available. If they failed to adequately protect their single most valuable asset, they risked permanently alienating the millions of brand-new fans she had single-handedly shepherded into the sport. But if they extended her any form of visible preferential treatment, they risked music, giving full oxygen to the jealousy narrative and stoking an even more corrosive animosity among the rest of the player base. The unspoken and unresolved tension festering inside those locker rooms evolved into a powerful symbol of the league's far larger and more existential identity crisis. A bruising collision between the old guard fiercely protecting its legacy and the new sensation rewriting every rule in existence, with the entire future direction of the WNBA dangling precariously in the balance. But buried beneath all the on-court chaos and relentless public relations disasters, the WNBA's leadership was quietly and methodically positioning itself for a single defining event that carries the genuine power to solve nearly every problem plaguing the league simultaneously: the upcoming negotiation of its media rights deal. This is the billion-dollar war being waged just beyond the horizon, and its outcome will carve out the league's entire trajectory for the next full decade. The WNBA's existing television contract, which delivers the league roughly $60 million annually, is scheduled to expire in 2025. That agreement was hammered out and signed in a world that existed before Caitlin Clark. Now, riding the wave of extraordinary ratings and the kind of mainstream cultural penetration the league has never once experienced before, the WNBA finds itself occupying a position of genuine negotiating leverage it has never held in its entire history. Industry experts are projecting that the incoming media rights deal could command hundreds of millions of dollars on an annual basis. Music, potentially multiplying the league's current revenue 4 times over or beyond. This historic flood of incoming cash represents the only truly realistic and viable path toward dismantling the salary crisis entirely. The transformative new television deal would pump so much fresh capital into the league's infrastructure that it could finally sit down and sign a new collective bargaining agreement capable of paying every single player, from the top rookie pick all the way down to the last veteran on the bench. A salary structure that finally and unambiguously reflects their standing as elite professional athletes competing at the absolute highest level. It is the light waiting at the far end of a very long and very dark tunnel. This is precisely why Commissioner Cathy Engelbert has remained so relentlessly and almost obsessively fixated on growth metrics, even while dodging and deflecting every pointed question about the salary crisis. She is acutely and strategically aware that every sold-out arena and every record-demolishing broadcast represents another powerful bargaining chip she can carry directly into the negotiating room with media giants like ESPN, Music, and Amazon. The future of the WNBA is not written solely on Caitlin Clark's performance between the lines on any given night. It is written on her sustained capacity to convince media executives and their billion-dollar budgets that her audience is deeply loyal, rapidly expanding, and absolutely here to stay. This looming negotiation is the ultimate all-or-nothing high-stakes gamble the league has ever been forced to place. If Engelbert executes it with precision and vision, she could usher in an entirely new and transformative golden era for the WNBA, one built on higher salaries, superior facilities, expanded resources, and genuine long-term security for every player in the league. But if she miscalculates or fumbles this singular and irreplaceable moment, she will have squandered the single greatest opportunity in the franchise history of women's professional basketball, potentially watching the momentum of the entire Caitlin Clark era dissolve into nothing but a cautionary tale. When everything is finally laid bare and examined honestly, the story of Caitlin, Music, Clark and her $76,000 salary is immeasurably larger than a simple contract disagreement between a player and a league. It is the story of an entire institution being dragged, sometimes violently and always publicly, into direct confrontation with its own deepest limitations and most stubborn structural failures. Clark has become a living, breathing paradox at the very heart of everything the WNBA is and everything it desperately wants to become. She is simultaneously its most powerful savior and its most uncomfortable and unavoidable problem. Her unmatched talent and her extraordinary commercial marketability are generating a level of sustained public interest and financial momentum the league has spent its entire existence only dreaming about, potentially cementing its financial foundation for generations yet to come. At the exact same time, the blinding brightness of her stardom has cast a harsh and completely unforgiving light on every systemic crack running through the league's foundation. From its humiliatingly inadequate pay structure to the volatile internal tensions simmering perpetually just beneath the polished surface, this entire controversy has laid bare a league that was fundamentally, structurally, and perhaps fatally unprepared for a superstar music of her particular and unprecedented magnitude. It was a system engineered purely for survival in difficult times, never once designed to accommodate explosive and sudden cultural dominance. And now, music, it is visibly, audibly, and undeniably cracking under the enormous and unrelenting pressure she brings simply by existing within it. The WNBA stands today at the sharpest and most consequential crossroads in its entire history, a pivotal moment in time that future generations will look back on and identify as either the precise point where it launched its long-awaited ascent into the true mainstream of professional American sports, or as the moment it blinked and let a colossal and once-in-history opportunity slip permanently through its fingers. Everything now rests squarely and heavily on the shoulders of its leadership to navigate this sprawling and deeply complex crisis with the intelligence and courage it demands. And ultimately, it all collapses down into one final, deeply and genuinely thought-provoking question that refuses to be ignored. Will the league find the wisdom and the will to fully harness the raw, transformative power of the Caitlin Clark phenomenon and use it to rebuild itself into the major professional league it has always ached and aspired to become? Or will the sheer gravitational weight of her stardom ultimately prove to be far too immense and overwhelming for its fragile and aging foundations to bear without breaking completely apart?